Eric, you represented dishonesty to this family. You're not welcome here." Those caustic remarks, loaded with resentment and disappointment, were like a blow to the chest. Spitting words out like venom in the middle of my brother Caleb's wedding reception, my own father said them. Caleb's silence made the terrible pain of humiliation much worse. Saying nothing, he stood there while our father tossed me as like I didn't matter. Anger swelling inside me was ready to burst. I was going to bolt when something unanticipated occurred. Clearly overwhelmed, a wedding staff member came up to me asking for assistance with an abrupt problem. Surprised, I moved in to help. That was the turning point in everything. My father truly saw me, saw the person I had grown to be, 2 times in decades. Not the failure he imagined, but someone deserving and competent. For me as much as for him, it was startling. In this family, I am Eric, and among 3 brothers. Our father was a rigorous, demanding attorney growing up who never tried to hide his partiality. The golden child, everything my father wanted in a son, confidence, success, and apparently flawless, was my brother Caleb. Conversely, I never measured up to his expectations and was always in his shadow. Our abode lacked somewhere for leisure or relaxation. Every moment had to be used for learning or attending lectures. If I felt happy kid, my father's criticism swiftly sapped it. I always came short, no matter how hard I tried to equal Caleb's successes or win my father's compliments. My failing the entrance exam for a famous university my father had been dreaming about for me set the breaking point. His silence following was worse than any ranting. In his eyes I seemed to have vanished. From then on, Caleb took front stage, and I was left behind. Not even the subdued support of my mother could cover the emptiness I experienced. Driven to get out of the stifling house, I had to make a tough decision. I went without speaking to my father after high school. I left a note for my mother informing her I was going to live my own life. I started to forge my own route after landing a job in a hotel. The hotel became into my one-stop shop, a house and a workplace all in one. It was a world unlike the expectations and assessments of my father. Among the hectic, diligent employees, I discovered a freedom and direction not felt before. Still, the work was not light. Wayne, the hotel manager, expected a lot from everyone and was austere. As someone just out of high school, I made plenty of mistakes that were harshly criticized. Eric, yet another error. How many times must I tell you? He would prod me to get better. Unlike what my father said, though, Wayne's comments were meant to uplifting rather than depressing. It was helpful. When I at last got his compliments, it made me proud and motivated, something I had never felt before. One moment comes quite clearly to me. San Antonio Day was the busiest time of year the hotel would experience. Having recently completed my training, the strain was intolerable. Tensions were high and everyone was running. Nevertheless, I was resolved to prove myself, not only to Wayne but also to myself. I came to discover something crucial among the confusion of the hotel. I could sense my own value without my father's permission. More significant than any thanks from him, I had created something on my own. I first had the opportunity to work alone that year. It was tougher than I ever imagined. The hotel was overflowing with guests, far more than usual, and every part of the staff was stretched thin. Dinner service, both in the dining hall and through room service, was pure chaos. Despite being new and inexperienced, I threw myself into the work, determined to give my best. I didn't want to let the team down. Then, in the middle of San Antonio Day, just when things seemed under control, a colleague suddenly fell ill. We were already short-staffed, so I knew I had to step up. I worked extra hours, doing everything I could to keep things running smoothly. For a while, it seemed like we had managed to survive the chaos, but then disaster struck. A pipe burst in the kitchen during the peak of the dinner rush. Water flooded the kitchen, and with no plumber available on San Antonio Day, the situation quickly spiraled out of control. Wayne, usually calm and collected, looked stressed as he tried to manage the crisis. Everyone was scrambling, and the pressure was enormous. In that moment of desperation, I realized this was my chance to truly prove myself. I stepped forward. "Wayne, can I try fixing the plumbing?" "I think I can do it," I said. He looked at me with doubt, but there wasn't another option. After a moment of hesitation, he nodded. What no one knew was that my time in a science-focused high school had taught me the basics of plumbing. It wasn't much, but it was enough to give me confidence. I got to work right away. 40 minutes later, the kitchen was back to normal. The flood was cleaned up, and the pipe was fixed. I turned to Wayne out of breath and said, "It's done. I fixed it." He hurried over to check, turning the faucet with a mix of hope and worry. When water flowed smoothly, the room erupted in smiles and applause. "Great job, Eric. You're my pride and joy," Wayne said warmly. His words filled me with a sense of accomplishment I had never felt before. Growing up, I had always longed for approval like this, but here it was, earned through my own effort. That day marked a turning point for me. Together, Wayne and I have faced the challenges of that chaotic San Antonio day and come out victorious. The fulfillment I felt stayed with me and helped shape the person I became. 17 years later, I was thriving in my role at the hotel. I had built a career from the ground up and felt proud of the life I had created. Then one day, a letter arrived from my mother. It was the first communication I'd received from her in years. Inside, she told me about my brother Caleb's upcoming wedding and pleaded with me to attend. Though I had grown distant from both my father and Caleb, my mother's heartfelt words touched me. Reluctantly, I decided to go. The wedding venue was a grand, luxurious hotel, exactly the kind of place that reflected Caleb and Dad's taste for extravagance. I arrived in my dependable old suit, feeling out of place among the elegantly dressed guests. Everywhere I looked, there were signs of wealth and high society. Caleb's bride was stunning with a graceful and polished demeanor. She seemed like the perfect match for his world. Part of me wondered if their union had been one of Dad's calculated moves, another way to strengthen his social ties. As I sat in the waiting area, I was surrounded by people of influence and privilege. I felt like an outsider, watching from the sidelines. The guests moved through their world with ease, their lives intertwined in ways I couldn't relate to. I was just an observer, detached from the wealth and power around me. For a moment, I questioned why I had come at all. But as I sat there, unnoticed and ignored, a realization dawned on me. I didn't need to fit into this world anymore. I no longer had to chase my father's approval or try to belong. The life I had built was far removed from this, and I was proud of that. I wasn't the boy who once sought validation from people who had dismissed him. I was someone who had found his own worth. I was Eric, a man who had found his own path. And for me, that was enough. But as I scanned the room, my eyes landed on two familiar faces. Instantly, a wave of unease washed over me. My father's expression was clear as day, pure disapproval. He and Caleb walked toward me, their presence heavy like a storm cloud. "Why are you here?" my father asked, his voice deep and commanding, laced with the same contempt I had grown up with. His words dragged back memories I had tried so hard to forget. "Is it so wrong to want to celebrate Caleb's wedding?" I replied, forcing a smile and trying to keep my tone casual. "Oh, and congrats, Caleb." Caleb gave a stiff nod, his face conflicted. I could see the tension in his eyes, torn between loyalty to Dad and the strained bond we'd always had. Before Caleb could say a word, Dad jumped in again, his voice cutting through the air like a knife. "What have you been doing all these years? Working some worthless job, no doubt." The disdain in his words was unmistakable, hitting me like a punch. "Eric, you shouldn't be here," he continued, his tone now dripping with contempt. Before I could reply, my mother rushed over, her face filled with worry as she tried to ease the tension. "Come on, Eric is here to celebrate. There's no need to be so harsh," she said, her voice shaky but full of hope. "Enough, Mom," Dad barked, his voice booming with authority. She fell silent. He turned back to me. "Eric, let me make this very clear. You are a disgrace. I don't want you ruining Caleb's celebration." No anger boiled inside me, fueled by years of rejection and neglect. I hadn't even wanted to come to this wedding, and now I was being humiliated in front of everyone. I clenched my fists, forcing myself to stay calm. "Fine, I'm leaving," I said, my voice steady with resolve. I turned on my heel, ready to walk out and never look back. But just as I reached the door, a voice stopped me. A staff member hurried over, looking flustered and out of breath. "Excuse me," they said, their voice urgent. "We have a problem. An unexpected guest arrived, and we're short on seats and food." I turned back, glancing at the scene. The room was tense. Everyone, from Natalie, the wedding planner, to the in-laws, and even my father, was scrambling to figure out a solution. Worry was etched on their faces. For a brief moment, I hesitated. Part of me wanted to walk out and let them deal with their mess. Wasn't this the perfect chance to leave them to the chaos just like they had left me behind so many times? But then memories of the past came flooding back. Despite everything, I remembered the times when Caleb and I were kids. There were rare moments, but they were real, times when he'd make room for me during study breaks, and we'd play together, even under Dad's strict rules. Those memories softened my anger, reminding me that once we were brothers, not just rivals. If I walked away now, I'd be no better than the man my father always said I was. With a deep breath and a new sense of determination, I turned back to the staff member. "Take me to Natalie," I said, my voice steadier. The staff member's tense expression eased, and they nodded, leading me back into the waiting room. As I walked in, I could feel the weight of the room. Natalie, my father, and the bride's father stood in the center, their faces etched with worry. The tension was thick, growing heavier with each passing moment. Natalie looked up as I approached her. Surprise quickly replaced by relief. "Eric, thank goodness. We really need help," she said, explaining the mess with the unexpected guests and the seating arrangements. I nodded, taking in the situation. Despite my father's harsh words and Caleb's silence, I knew what I needed to do. "All right, let's get to work," I said firmly, stepping forward to take control. For the rest of the evening, I worked alongside Natalie and the staff, making sure everything went as smoothly as possible. Dinner unfolded without further problems, and the tension in the room began to ease. As I moved through the event, I couldn't help but notice the subtle glances from my father and Caleb. They didn't say anything, but their silence felt different this time, less dismissive, almost as if they were seeing me for who I really was. By the end of the night, I stood on the sidelines, watching Caleb and his bride share their first dance. The happy couple looked perfect together, surrounded by their world of wealth and elegance. I wasn't part of that world, but for the first time, I didn't feel like an outsider. I had proven something, not to them, but to myself. I didn't need their approval because I had built a life of my own. Quietly, I slipped away from the celebration, leaving before anyone could notice. As I walked out, I felt a calm I hadn't known in years. This wasn't my world anymore, and that was okay. I had found my own place in life, and for me, that was enough. Before I reached the exit, I locked eyes with my father one last time. His expression was cold, his hostility clear. "Why is Eric still here?" he demanded sharply, his tone cutting. Before the tension could escalate, Natalie stepped in. "Please, sir, we need your help," she said, her voice calm but urgent. The words "sir" and her respectful tone caught him off guard. For the first time I saw a flicker of surprise on his face. He hadn't expected anyone to look at me with respect or authority. It was a small moment, but it was enough. I didn't need his approval. I had already found mine. I spoke calmly, revealing my position. "I've been the general manager of this hotel chain for quite some time," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Since I joined in the early days, we've expanded to several hotels and wedding venues across the country. In fact, this very hotel is under my supervision. I think I can handle this," I added with confidence, dismissing Dad's looming protests with a simple wave of my hand. "Dad, I'm busy right now. We'll talk later." Without waiting for his response, I turned to Natalie, focused on fixing the situation. "Relax, Natalie. Get the seating sorted, and I'll handle the food issue." She looked visibly relieved. "Understood," she replied, her voice lighter. "I'll leave the food to you and take care of everything else." She hurried off to execute the plan. Knowing all eyes were still on me, I left the room and headed straight to the kitchen. Inside, my good friend, Chef Gabriel, was busy with the day's preparations. "Hey, you!" I called out, spotting him. "Eric, what brings you here?" he asked, curious. "I'm actually a guest today," I said, shaking my head with a chuckle. "It's my brother's wedding, but we've run into a little problem. We're one meal short. Think you can help?" Gabriel grinned. "Of course. I'll whip something up. Don't worry about it." "Thanks so much. I owe you one. Maybe dinner next time," I said, feeling relieved. "Looking forward to it," he replied with a wink, already moving to prepare the missing meal. After tying up a few loose ends, I made my way back to the waiting room. Most of the guests had already moved to the ceremony area, leaving just my parents and the bride's family behind. I approached then with a confident smile. "The issue is resolved. An extra meal is on its way," I announced. Relief washed over my mom's face, and the bride's parents smiled warmly. Even my father, though still conflicted, seemed to hold back his usual sharp criticism. Instead, his voice softened, and for once, his pride was unmistakable. "Eric, thank you. Because of you, the celebration can go on without a hitch," he said, his gratitude genuine. "All in a day's work as a general manager," I replied with a small smile, feeling a quiet sense of victory. I led them to the ceremony hall, where the lights dimmed and the bride and groom made their grand entrance. They were radiant, their happiness lighting up the room. The ceremony unfolded beautifully, every detail falling perfectly into place, as if the earlier chaos had never happened. When it was finally time for the meal, I made sure everything ran smoothly. Each guest was served without issue. Only after confirming that all was in order did I allow myself a quiet sigh of relief, knowing the day had turned out well. I found myself chatting warmly with both families. They expressed their heartfelt gratitude, especially the bride's family, who kept thanking me over and over for stepping in when things were falling apart. In that moment, surrounded by smiles and kind words, I was reminded of why I loved my job. It wasn't just about managing a hotel or organizing events. It was about making a difference when it really mattered. "Eric, thank you so much. We had the best day ever, all because of you," they said, their appreciation sincere and heartfelt. "No worries. I'm just glad I could help. Wishing you both all the happiness in the world," I replied with a smile, feeling proud of how everything had turned out. Turning to face my parents and Caleb, I saw my mom's face glowing with pride. "Eric, you did wonderfully." "Thank you," she said, her voice filled with genuine admiration. Caleb stepped forward next. His apology was unexpected but sincere. "Thanks for stepping in. I'm really sorry," he said, his tone honest. I couldn't help but smile. "As long as I could help, it's all good," I reassured him, feeling my earlier resentment melt away. Finally, I turned to my dad. He didn't say a word, his emotions hard to read, but there was something different in his eyes, a quiet acknowledgement. Though he stayed silent, I could tell in his own way he was grateful. It felt like a small but meaningful closure, a moment of understanding despite all our differences. Just then my phone buzzed. A message from another hotel in the next town reminded me that more work was waiting for me. Instead of feeling frustrated, I felt a sense of purpose. Looks like I've got more work to do, but hey, I enjoy it, so no complaints, I said with a grin. All right, I'm off. You two take care, I added before leaving. As I walked away, I couldn't shake the feeling that this might be the last time I'd see Caleb or Dad for a long while, maybe even forever. The thought lingered, but I didn't dwell on it. I had work to do, and that's where I turned my focus. 7 days after Caleb's wedding, I finally got a rare day off. Reclining on my sofa with a steaming cup of coffee, I was soaking in a quiet moment of peace. That tranquility didn't last long, though. The doorbell rang. Curious, I got up and opened the door, surprised to see Caleb standing there. "Caleb, what brings you here?" I asked, caught off guard. "Sorry, I got your address from Mom. I wanted to talk to you," Caleb said, his tone cautious. I invited him in, not worrying about the state of my home. It was just Caleb, after all. I poured Caleb a cup of coffee, and he took a slow sip. "Thanks. Smells good," he said, trying to smile, but I could tell there was more on his mind. As we sat down, his mood shifted. His gaze became serious, and I knew he had something important to say. After a moment of silence, he finally spoke. "I'm really sorry for everything," he said, his voice softer than I'd ever heard it. I was caught off guard. Caleb wasn't the type to apologize, and hearing him say this left me puzzled. "Hey, it's all right, Caleb," I said, trying to ease the tension. But it was clear he wasn't done. He took a deep breath and continued, opening up in a way I never expected. "You probably think I'm the older brother who has it all together, but the truth is, I envy you, Eric." His words hit me like a lightning bolt. I sat there stunned as the room filled with silence. I had always seen Caleb as the golden child, the one who had everything I didn't. But now, sitting across from me, he was showing a side of himself I had never seen before. His vulnerability took me by surprise and left me unsure of how to respond. For a moment, everything else, the rivalry, the distance, the tension, faded away. It was just the two of us finally understanding each other in a way we never had before. "I never knew you felt that way, Caleb," I admitted, guilt creeping into my voice as I tried to process what he had just said. "That's the thing. It's not your fault, Eric," he reassured me, his weak smile showing the emotions he was trying to hold back. In that moment, I felt a sense of connection between us, something that had been missing for so long. "Caleb, I'm sorry I never realized you were struggling too," I confessed, regret heavy in my voice. His faint smile said more than words ever could. "It's really not your fault," he repeated, his voice quiet but steady. For the first time, we began to talk about the things we had never said out loud. The walls between us started to crumble, and our bond as brothers grew stronger. "I admire you, Caleb," I told him honestly. "You've gotten through things I can't even imagine, but I want to share my story with you too." As I spoke, I could feel the weight of my words. It wasn't just about telling him what I had been through. It was about building something new between us. This conversation wasn't just a moment. It was the start of something better. I paused for a moment to gather my thoughts. Caleb stayed silent, watching me closely, giving me the space to continue. "Breaking away from our parents and becoming independent wasn't easy," I said. "At the beginning, it was really tough." As I spoke, I realized something. We had both faced our own battles in different ways. "Yeah, we've both had our struggles," Caleb agreed, his voice sincere. It felt like he wanted to say more, but he seemed unsure how to start. I didn't have all the answers, so I just spoke from the heart, hoping that would provide Caleb some clarity. To be honest, Caleb, I think you should do what you really want to do, without worrying about Dad, I replied. Caleb heard my words, and I could feel the weight off his shoulders. You are right, Eric. You have definitely helped me get clarity. Thank you, he said, his tone obviously expressing thanks. I answered, no, thank you for coming over, and meant it. He promised to return for coffee just before I escorted him to the door. 3 months later, Caleb sent me a letter. In it, he informed me he had chosen to pursue his actual love, glasswork, instead of his legal career. Caleb had found serenity in his wife's support and a fresh determination to follow the road he had chosen, even though Dad disagreed. Reading his message and considering Caleb's path made me proud. Our family dynamics had shifted, and our relationship had strengthened. For every one of us, it seemed to mark a fresh start. Lost in my ideas, my phone alarm brought me back to reality. Another day in the career I had selected and grown to love was about to begin.